So it seems like we came to a compromise. Big states will get or have more power when it comes to the legislative branch in the House of Representatives, and small states will have that sense of equality in the Senate, where representation is not based on population; it's based on equality. But northern states were at a disadvantage, or you could argue that southern states would be at a disadvantage if their slave population wasn't counted. And that's how we came up with the Three-Fifths Compromise. So let's go ahead and read that, and we'll see if we can't figure out what it means at the end. The Three-Fifths Compromise. Another major compromise by the delegates dealt with counting enslaved people. Southern states wanted to include the enslaved in their population counts to gain delegates in the House of Representatives. So we see here that population equals power. Northern states objected to this idea because enslaved people were legally considered property. Some delegates from northern states argued that the enslaved, as property, should be counted for the purpose of taxation, but not representation. However, neither side considered giving enslaved people the right to vote. The committee's solution, known as the Three-Fifths Compromise, was to count each enslaved person as three-fifths of a free person for both taxation and representation. In other words, every 5 enslaved persons would equal 3 free people. On July 12th, the convention delegates voted to approve the Three-Fifths Compromise. 4 days later, they agreed that each state should elect 2 senators. So let's go ahead and go up to the board and take a look at how this Three-Fifths Compromise impacted our nation. So you might be wondering, what's the big deal about population? Okay? Well, we know that this whole idea of equality and equality not being fair doesn't work. So we're under a new system now, the U.S. Constitution, where population equals power. You got to remember that. I'm going to be asking you that a lot. I'm going to be like, hey, Ms. Sheldon, what's population equal? And you better tell me power. Okay? Population equals power. Over here in the Great Compromise, we've got a legislature. A legislature makes laws. They meet the needs of the people. They coin money. They borrow money. And each representative comes from a state. So they're going to want to do what's best for the state. So the more population a state has, the more representatives they have, the more votes they have. Population equals votes. So the Three-Fifths Compromise was the result of an argument between northern states versus southern states. If you're wondering why, it's because the South had an extremely large amount of enslaved people. If those slaves were counted in the population, that would mean more power, more votes in the House of Representatives under the Great Compromise, under our Constitution. Okay? The Three-Fifths Compromise was exactly that. For every 5 slaves, 5 slaves, that equals 3 people for the population. So if you count slaves, even a fraction of the total population, 60% of the slaves, that's going to bump up southern states' population count and give them more votes, more power. Population equals, that's right, it equals power. Okay? We've got to remember that. Population equals power. So this was a way for the northern states and the southern states to come to an agreement. The southern states would also have to pay taxes on their slaves. So it wasn't all good for the southern states. The rest of the country still benefited a little bit. Okay? Now you might be wondering, why is this idea of southern states having more votes, more power, such a big deal, so important to them? Okay? We know that the North is against slavery, and the South is desperately trying to hang on to it because their economy, their plantation system, depends on slavery. That's why the South was so adamant about having this 3/5 compromise put in there because they felt threatened by the North trying to take away their slavery. So we got to keep that in mind in the future. Population equals power. And the 3/5 compromise was all about gaining more votes for the southern states here in the House of Representatives under this new bicameral system under the Great Compromise in the U.S. Constitution.